now. So we were looking at Chapter 7, which is continuity management, and we discussed most of the ideas in this lecture. There's a few things left to discuss. Um, we did cover this few concepts here, which is regarding different recovery options. And here we also this stuff about risk reduction. We did talk about that yesterday, and about our recovery point objective and our recovery time objective. So you should be familiar with those ideas. The That's kind of where we left off. Was we talked about recovery options, and I guess if I was going to summarize that, we would say that depending on the time, and we have an actual technical term for that, which is our recovery time objective. So, which has a specific meaning, which is the amount of time that can elapse before we start getting into critical existential threat to our business through the or before until this becomes sort of a disaster. So we have a time, and because that time is important, because that this is going to relate to some money, I guess. Will our business go? Will we go out of business, or how much money should we set aside for mitigation? That is to reduce the risk. Um, will be determined by that time, because the shorter the time, the more that we have to do in terms of sort of reducing the risk. So that's the relationship. If the time is big, then the amount of risk management can be a lot less and can therefore be a lot cheaper. And down to the point where if we have our data and our systems are so critical, and the RTO and the RPO are so small. And so we did talk about the RPO in the last lesson and the RTO, but let's just mention it briefly here. So the RTO is the amount of time before it becomes critical, and that we have to that if we don't recover by that time, we're going to be threatened. And the RPO is how far back in time can we go and still maintain our business. And if either of those are very short, so the RPO is not about time, it's about the amount of data do we have to keep up to date, how many transactions can we have which are not backed up, that type of thing, which is usually going to be quite small. So backing up data is going to be way cheaper than sort of going ahead and running sort of parallel operations, which we might have to do with an immediate recovery. All right, so we did discuss that. So that's just sort of to bring us up to the point where we left off at the last lesson. These last few slides, and there's only like 3 or 4 of them, are about, so once we have considered and we've gone through all of the concepts that were in the start of this lesson, once we've considered all of that and we've got ourselves a disaster recovery plan, what we might need to consider at that point is the actual responsibility for it. And that's referred to here as overall authority and control. And with any sort of business enterprise or even government body, there's going to be somebody at the head of that organization that takes the ultimate control. And for disaster recovery, because it threatens the organization, by definition, we're talking about an existential threat, because a disaster threatens the organization at that level, then the person at that level has to take that responsibility. And so it's not something that we can just do as an IT group and sit away in a corner somewhere and come up with all these plans. We actually need to involve the people at the very top of the organization, and not least because there may be significant resources that may need to be applied. So, for example, if you're in a bank or a telephone company or something like that, you're going to be spending a lot of money on extra infrastructure to reduce the risk of disaster. That you're not just going to be sort of relying on sort of refiring up your servers and stuff like that after 24 hours or a week of being down. You're going to be relying more on just making sure that it doesn't go down, because your business is going to be so threatened by being offline for any time. Okay, so executive management is going to have to take responsibility for that. They're going to have to be brought into the discussion of the disaster management plan, disaster recovery plan, and they're going to have to be brought into the planning, the financial sort of planning of what of the risk reduction. So remember there's two parts of this, which is reducing the risk and then the recovery. The next point that we got here is along the lines of like fire alarm practices. We've had those at the college, right? That's the kind of thing that this is about here. So that's a form of disaster planning. So imagine what can we do with our information technology infrastructure to test to see that we're ready for a disaster. And that's what we're calling here is our testing. And so with our testing to see that our IT, our plan, our disaster recovery plan, is good enough to protect the assets in our IT department. Yeah, so it's kind of going to be kind of along the lines of fire drills kind of thing, and and in fact, the fire we would actually integrate with that. Fire drills would be part of the things that we do, but there would be other things as well. So what do we do in the case of a power being out? So that's something that threatens your IT, but it doesn't really threaten people. I mean, nobody's going to die in a building because the power is out. They're just going to get out and go in their car and go home. You know what I mean? There's no power. Okay, I'll walk down the stairs instead of catching the lift. But on the other hand, if the power is out, you got a big problem with your computers, right? Now it doesn't mean to say that the computers will stop working. By definition, I suppose they stop working if they don't have power. But what I mean is, when the power comes back on, they'll work again. But the problem is, then your databases and your systems may be corrupted, and you may have lost important data. And so you will have some kind of a plan, and you can do some testing of what you would do in the case of power failure, in the case of any of these sort of disasters from nature or attacks from outside. And they could be attacks that would be like hacker attacks, or they could be sort of physical attacks of people. What are your plans in your business to overcome that? Now, example of this, um, I think it was 1990, about 1997, in Quebec in Canada, they had a sort of a sleet, really bad weather, kind of like how the bad weather sort of affected Texas in the last hour. Not just Texas, by the way. I have a parcel that I'm waiting for that was being shipped to me from Florida, and for the last week it's been sitting in Memphis, Tennessee, and I'm like, why is it still in Memphis? And went online today and I found out, well, there's two reasons it's still in Memphis. Well, one is because of the COVID, there's a lot less airplanes flying, and so these parcels can't go. But the other reason is because they had this snow all over Memphis, which doesn't happen very often, not very often at all. And as a result of that, even less planes are flying. And so, but they're talking about 2-3 day delay. But this parcel's been sitting in Memphis for a week. Anyways, at least I could find that out. So the computers are still working, right? Well, we hope. Um, so, a bit of a diversion there. The walkthroughs we would do would cover all of those things. Now we've sort of broken this down into full tests and partial tests. So full test is going to involve kind of like an audit, as it says here. Some kind of external person is going to come and test the systems. Now it's important that somebody outside your organization come and test your systems, because they don't have any anything personal riding on this, right? They're not going to lose their job, or they're not going to, get a pay rise or anything else as a result of anything that happens in the audit. So they're distance from the result of the audit so that they can be a bit more honest in their appraisal. And so that's why we do that. We get an external person to come up with the report, and they look at all of the different, and the other thing is external, besides the honesty aspect, and honesty is only part of it. The other thing is that because they're not part of the system, they're actually able to see things that people are a bit, it's like the forest and the trees scenario. They can see things that people that are too close might not be able to see. And also, another side of it is they may have done this with many other organizations, and so they actually know what to look for. And so we get somebody from outside to come and have a look and test our systems, and they can give a better report than we could give ourselves. Partial test is just going to test some aspects of the disaster recovery plan. And yeah, now, a scenario test, what we're talking about there is kind of using your imagination to sort of come up with, what could possibly go wrong kind of thing, right? And so it's like, so it's about sort of considering what could go wrong. This is where that outside person is probably in a better position because they might have seen a lot more of this. So lastly, I hope the idea here is given that definitely people in the IT department and those people that are making decisions, so managers in the IT, they need to have some kind of understanding of this, what could go wrong, what they need to do to make sure that things don't go wrong. And so there's some education and awareness regarding that. The testing at regular intervals is just like you do fire drills at regular intervals just to make sure that everything is always up to speed. The audit, I've already used that word here for a minute. The idea there is that we're testing to see if the reality is the same as our plan. So in our plan, we've decided that every night we have a nightly backup, and maybe we have an hourly one on certain things, and there's certain people that are responsible for certain parts of maintaining the system and reducing the risk. So the audit would be just to make sure that the things that we said we're going to do, that we're actually doing those. And continuous improvement. I hope that's obvious. Basically, the idea is if a disaster happens, we would sit down and think about it afterwards and sort of say, oh, well, this happened, that happened, that happened. What can we do better next time? And you'll definitely have, even though you've had experts help you develop your disaster recovery plan, um, with all of these plans, the plans are going to change when they're faced with reality, right? Once reality comes, then we start changing things kind of quickly. Now, I was talking about this terrible incident that happened in Canada in 1997. What happened is this terrible weather event, and as a result of that, the entire two provinces of Canada, the big ones, Ontario and Quebec, they lost power for 3 or 4 days. And IT, this is very bad for IT, as you can imagine. But there was one company, it was Reuters, and they actually did not lose their systems at all during that time. And so they had a very good disaster recovery plan in place. They had a uninterruptible power supply, a UPS, that was connected to their business. That gave them like 6 hours of power after the original power was lost. They had developed contracts with local businesses, and they pulled in those contracts. And one of those contracts was to have a diesel generator delivered to their business. And so within 2 or 3 hours, they had this diesel generator delivered to the business, and that was connected. And so the power never even went off for them. I mean, it went from the regular power to the UPS, to the uninterruptible power supply, to the diesel generator that was plugged in, and they had this rental agreement, and away they went. And so that's an example of very, very good planning related to power outage. And there's lots of other sort of things that we could sort of consider would be in our plan.